I want to start with the part that still keeps me up. Because if I bury it in the middle, you'll think I'm building towards something, and I'm not. There's a break room in the building I maintain that nobody remembers building. It's not on the floor plans. It's not in the maintenance database. The people who've worked there for 30 years will tell you to your face that it doesn't exist, and they're not lying. They genuinely don't remember it. But it's there. I've been inside it. I've sat in one of the chairs. And the worst part isn't that I found it. The worst part is that after a while it found me back. Let me back up and tell it the way it happened, because the order matters. It's the order that makes you stop being able to explain it away. I'm a building maintenance technician. Have been for almost 11 years. The last 6 of those have been at a place I'll just call the Meridian complex, which is what's printed on the lease paperwork, even though half the tenants call it something else. It's an old commercial building off a frontage road. The kind of place that started as a single-story manufacturing plant in the 60s and then got added on to so many times that the whole thing is a Frankenstein of decades. There's the original concrete floor section in the back, which is half warehouse and half loading dock now. There's a 2-story office wing that got bolted on in the 80s, all dropped ceilings and beige. And there's a newer front section from maybe 2004 with the nicer lobby and the badge readers that actually work. My job is everything that keeps that mess running. HVAC plumbing, lights, drywall patches, door hardware. The endless war against the loading dock levelers, which are older than I am and break in creative new ways. Every season I work a lot of nights and weekends because that's when you can shut down a system without 40 people emailing you about it. You learn a building when you maintain it at night. You learn it better than the people who work in it during the day because they only see their own desks and their own coffee station. I see the bones, the chases, the crawl spaces, the panel rooms, the spots where one renovation slammed into another and left a dead corner nobody ever uses. So when I tell you I know that building, I mean I know it. I have the maintenance maps practically memorized. I know which walls are real and which ones are just studs and drywall thrown up to hide a column. I know where the original 1960s footprint ends and the 80s edition begins. Because there's a seam in the floor where 2 slabs meet and the tile never sits right over it. That seam is where this starts. It was a Saturday in, I want to say late October. Doesn't matter exactly. We'd had a complaint the whole previous week about a draft and a smell on the first floor of the office wing. Down at the far end, past the supply closets where almost nobody goes. People said it smelled like old coffee and something mildewy. And there was cold air coming from somewhere it shouldn't. That whole end of the wing is offices that got converted to storage years ago, so it's not like anyone's sitting there suffering. But a draft means a breach somewhere, and a breach means I'm chasing down where conditioned air is escaping or where outside air is getting in. That's money. That's my job. So I'm down there alone on a Saturday with my flashlight and my draft meter, this little smoke pen thing, walking the hallway and checking where the air moves. And I get to the end of the hall where it dead ends at a wall. On the map, that wall is the back of the supply closet and then solid structure beyond it, the edge of the old slab. There's a column in there. It's a real wall, a real end of a real hallway. I'd been to that dead end 100 times, except this time there was a door in it. I want to be careful here because I know how this sounds. I didn't gasp. I didn't feel a chill. I felt annoyed. My first honest thought was that somebody had done unpermitted work. Because that happens more than you'd believe. A tenant cuts a doorway, builds out a space, never tells facilities, And then 6 months later, I'm the one who finds out the hard way when a sprinkler line's been buried in a wall. So I'm standing there looking at this door, thinking, who cut a door into my dead-end hallway and didn't file anything? It was an ordinary door. Hollow core painted that institutional tan with a lever handle worn shiny on the underside the way handles get when thousands of hands have used them for years. There was a little frosted glass window in the upper half, the kind they put in old office doors, and behind it the glow of fluorescent light. And taped to the glass, slightly crooked, yellowed at the edges, was a piece of paper that said, "Break Room," in faded marker. The draft was coming from under it, and the smell, that old coffee smell people had complained about, was strongest right there. I tried the handle. It opened. Inside was a break room. A completely ordinary, deeply unremarkable break room. I almost laughed at myself because I'd built it up in 2 seconds into some big mystery, and it was just a room. Cheap laminate tables, the kind with the metal legs. Mismatched chairs. A whole collection of them from different eras. Some of those stacking plastic ones. A couple of the rolling office kind, with the cloth seats worn through. One of those old vinyl and chrome diner-looking chairs that had to be from the 70s. A counter with a sink. 2 vending machines, humming against the far wall, one for snacks, one for drinks, both of them lit up and running. A microwave. A coffee maker on the counter with a half-full pot in it. A refrigerator. A wall clock. A corkboard absolutely covered in notices and flyers and curling pieces of paper. Stained drop ceiling tiles overhead. A couple of them watermarked brown. Fluorescent tubes, one of them buzzing and flickering just slightly. Carpet tile on the floor. That gray industrial stuff, worn to the backing in a path between the door and the vending machines. It smelled exactly like every break room I've ever been in. Old coffee, microwave plastic. A little bit of stale carpet and dust. It was warm in there, warmer than the hallway, which made the cold air complaint make even less sense. But I was already moving past that. The thing is, I knew this room wasn't supposed to be here. But the room itself was so normal that my brain just sort of accepted it the way you accept a room you walk into. Of course, there's a break room. It's a workplace. There are break rooms. I stood there a second, and I did what I always do when I find something that's not on my maps. I pulled out my phone to take pictures. I took a few. The tables, the vending machines, the corkboard, the door from the inside. I figured I'd document it, report it Monday, and somebody in property management would have to explain who the hell built a break room nobody told facilities about. I noticed the coffee pot was warm, not lukewarm. Warm like it had been made not long ago, and I remember thinking, okay, so somebody uses this room. Some tenant's crew comes down here. Fine. Mystery half solved. I poured a little of the coffee into the sink just to see, and it was real coffee. Dark. Fresh enough to still smell like coffee and not like a burnt pot that's been sitting for hours. I checked the fridge because the draft and the smell had a slightly off, organic edge to them, and I wanted to make sure nobody had left food in there to rot. Inside were lunches, brown bags, a couple of those soft-sided lunch boxes, some Tupperware, and every one of them had a name written on it. Masking tape with names in marker, the way people label their food so coworkers don't steal it. Denise, R. Pettigrew, Marcus, Tommy do not touch. A couple I couldn't read. I closed the fridge. I figured I'd cross-reference the names Monday, find out which tenant these people worked for, and tell them their secret break room was now on my radar. Before I left, I looked at the wall clock. It read 4:10. My watch said it was about 2:30 in the afternoon. I figured the wall clock was just wrong, dead battery or never set, the way clocks in forgotten rooms always are. I went back to chasing my draft, found a gap around an old dryer vent 2 doors down that I figured was the real source, sealed it temporarily, and went home. I didn't think about the break room again that night. That's the part I want you to understand. It didn't haunt me. It didn't follow me home in my mind. It was just a weird find. I've found weirder. I once found a fully furnished apartment in the mechanical penthouse of a building where a maintenance guy from the 90s had basically been living. Buildings are full of forgotten spaces. A break room barely registered. Monday is where it started to register. Monday morning I went to the facilities office, sat down with the big binder of as-built drawings and the maintenance database on the computer, and I went to log the break room and flag it for property management. I pulled up the first floor of the office wing. I found the dead-end hallway. I found the supply closet. And past the supply closet where the door was, the drawing showed solid wall and then the edge of the original slab. Beyond that, nothing. Structure, the column, just like I'd always known. So I figured the as-builts were out of date, which happens constantly. I checked the maintenance database for any work orders in that area, anything about a build-out, a door installation, a tenant improvement. Nothing. Not in 6 years of records, which was as far back as the digital system went. I went into the physical archive, the filing cabinets with the older paperwork orders, and I dug through the office wing folder. Nothing about a break room down there. There was an old note about converting those end offices to storage in 2009. Nothing after. Okay. So it predates the digital records and somebody never filed the paper. Annoying, but possible. I went to find Dale. Dale's our longest tenured building engineer. Been there since the late 80s, before it was even called Meridian. If anybody knew the history of every renovation, it was Dale. I found him in the shop and I said, hey, that break room down the end of the first floor office hall, past the supply closet, who built that? What tenant uses it? And Dale looked at me like I'd asked him something in another language. He said, what break room? There's no break room down there. That's the end of the hall. That's the old slab edge. There's nothing down there but storage in the column. I said no. The door at the very end. The one with the break room sign and the frosted glass. Vending machines, fridge, coffee maker. He shook his head and said the nearest break room to that wing is up on the second floor by the elevators, and the other one's over in the warehouse section. There's nothing on the first floor at that end. He said it kind of flat. Not like he was joking, not like he was hiding anything. Just like a man stating a fact about a building he'd known for 30-odd years. I had the pictures on my phone. I pulled them up to show him. And here's the first thing that actually put a real cold feeling in my chest. Because up until then, it was all just paperwork being wrong. The pictures were there. I could see them. The tables, the vending machines, the corkboard. But Dale looked at them and he sort of frowned and squinted and said, "Where'd you take these?" "Looks like the old break room over at the Hartley plant." He said it like he was looking at a photo of a different building entirely. I said, "No, Dale, this is here, this is downstairs. Saturday?" And he just kind of shrugged and said the lighting looked the same as 100 break rooms, and he had a leveler to fix, and he walked off. I want to be fair to Dale. I don't think he was gaslighting me. I've worked with the man for 6 years. He's blunt to a fault. If he'd built that room or knew about it, he'd have just said so. The honest, disturbing truth is that when he looked at my photos, he didn't see what I saw. He saw a generic break room that could have been anywhere. He couldn't connect it to our building because in his memory, that room did not exist in our building. So now I had a problem. I had a room I'd stood in with photos to prove it that didn't exist on paper and didn't exist in the memory of the one guy who remembered everything. I did the reasonable thing. I went back down to look at it again. It was Monday, mid-morning, daylight outside, fluorescent lights on in the hall. I walked down to the dead end, and the door was there. Same tan door, same frosted glass, same crooked break room sign. I felt this weird relief, honestly, because for a second I'd been scared it would be gone, and I'd be the crazy one. It was there. I opened it, same room, same hum of the vending machine, same coffee smell, same warmth. But it wasn't exactly the same. And this is where I started writing things down because I didn't trust my own memory anymore. The chairs were arranged differently. On Saturday, they'd been mostly pushed in under the tables, neat, the way you leave a room. Now a couple of them were pulled out and turned, like people had been sitting and gotten up. One of the rolling chairs was a good 4 feet from any table, out in the middle of the floor, facing the door, facing me. The coffee pot was full again. On Saturday, I'd poured some out. Now it was full to the line and warm. And the corkboard had something new on it. On Saturday, I'd photographed the corkboard, and I'd captured this jumble of old notices, a faded OSHA poster, a flyer for a holiday potluck with no year on it, a handwritten notice about not leaving food in the fridge over the weekend, a few business cards, an old phone list. Now, pinned in the middle, was a single sheet of paper that hadn't been there before. A break schedule, a grid, printed, names down the side, and time slots across the top. The kind of thing a shift supervisor tapes up so people know when they're covered for lunch. I went over and read it, and I didn't recognize most of the names. Denise, which matched a lunch in the fridge. R. Pettigrew, a few others. And then about 2/3 of the way down the list, in the same printed font as all the rest, was my name, my first and last name, with a break time penciled in next to it. The same handwriting as everything else on the board. I had never signed up for anything in that room. I'd been in it twice. I'd told one person it existed and he didn't believe me. I took it off the board and put it in my pocket, and I left, and I closed the door. And I'll be honest, I half walked, half jogged back to the shop, and I told myself a story the whole way that somebody was messing with me, that this was a prank, that somebody had built this room as a joke and was watching me on a hidden camera, and they'd printed my name to freak me out. That story held together for about a day, and I clung to it because the alternative didn't have a shape I could hold. The reason it fell apart is the cameras. We have security cameras throughout the complex. Not great ones, but they cover the main hallways, the entrances, the loading docks. The first floor office hallway has a camera at the elevator end, pointed down toward the dead end. If somebody had been building rooms and printing schedules and pranking me, they'd be on camera walking down that hall. I knew the guy who managed the camera system, a contractor named Reyes, who came in once a week. I asked him, real casual, if I could see the footage from that first floor hall Saturday afternoon and again that Monday morning, because I was tracking down who'd been accessing a storage area. He pulled it up for me, no problem. Saturday afternoon, I watched myself walk down the hall on the camera. I watched me get to the dead end. And on the camera, there was no door. There was just the wall. I watched myself reach out toward the wall, watched my arm move like I was opening something, And then I watched myself step forward and disappear, not dramatically, not in a flash, but the way you'd step out of frame, except there was no frame to step out of. There was just wall, and I was gone. The hallway sat empty for about 40 minutes on the timestamp. Then I reappeared, stepping back out of the wall, and walked away. Reyes didn't notice anything. To him, it just looked like the camera had a bad angle, and I'd stepped behind something. He said, yeah, that corner's a dead spot. The camera doesn't quite cover it. The wall's at a weird angle. And he's right that the camera doesn't quite cover it. But it covered enough to show me walking into a solid wall and coming back out 40 minutes later, and the camera, like Dale, simply could not see the door. The other thing, the timestamp, I'd gone in around 2:30 on my watch. I'd felt like I was in there maybe 10, 15 minutes. The camera said 40. That detail bothered me more than almost anything because it was so small and so wrong. I'd lost half an hour and felt like I'd lost nothing. I checked the badge logs too, since our system records every door access with a badge reader. The first floor office wing's main door logged my entry Saturday, but there was no door reader on the break room because as far as the system was concerned, there was no door there to put a reader on. So nothing recorded me entering or leaving it. I'd been somewhere the building's whole nervous system couldn't feel. I want to tell you that I escalated this, that I went to property management and reported a structural and security anomaly. I drafted an email. I had the photos attached and the work order history, and I was going to lay it all out professionally. And I sat there with my finger over the send button, and I thought about how it would read. I found a room that's not on any plans, that the cameras can't see, that Dale doesn't remember, and there's a schedule in it with my name on it that I didn't write. I thought about how the most likely outcome was that someone would walk down there with me in the daylight, and the door would be a wall, and I'd be the maintenance guy who needs a leave of absence, so I didn't send it. I told myself I needed more first. I told myself I needed to understand it before I reported it. That was the first time I made a choice to keep it to myself, and I've thought a lot since then about whether that was the choice that pulled me in. I started going back. Carefully, I told myself, documenting. I'd go in, take pictures, write down everything I noticed, and leave fast. I started keeping a little notebook because I didn't trust digital. I don't know why. I just felt like the room could reach into a phone, and a printed schedule with my name on it had made me superstitious about anything with a screen. Here's what I logged over the next few weeks, and I'm giving it to you the way I wrote it because the pattern is the whole point. The vending machine. The snack one took cards, modern, worked fine. I bought a bag of chips once just to test it, and it dropped a bag of a brand I didn't recognize, a chip company I've never seen before or since, and the expiration date stamped on it was a year that hadn't happened yet. The drink machine, the older one, didn't take cards or bills. It had a coin slot, and above the coin slot a little handwritten label that said, exact change tokens or badge. There was a slot below the coins, thin, the size of a card. I tried my badge in it once. The machine made a sound, this long mechanical clunk, and the little display that should show a price instead showed a number that counted down like a timer, from some figure in the hundreds, ticking down by ones. And I yanked my badge out, and the counting stopped, and I never did that again. The microwave clock. Always 12 o'clock, blinking. The way a microwave blinks when the power's been cut, except the microwave worked. I never tested it with food, but the light came on, the plate turned. A microwave that has power keeps time. This one blinked 12 o'clock like it had just been plugged in every single visit for weeks. The wall clock. Always read 4:10, never moved. I brought a screwdriver one visit and took it off the wall to check it, and there was no battery in it. No mechanism that I could see that would let it run at all. Just a clock, face frozen at 4:10 with no way to be frozen there because it had nothing inside to freeze. 4:10? 10 after 4. I've come to think that's quitting time, or close to it. The end of a day shift. The time you start watching the clock and willing it to move. The corkboard kept changing. I photographed it every visit and laid the photos out at home like a detective in a bad movie. And the notices shifted. A potluck flyer would be there 1 week and gone the next, replaced by a memo about a policy from a company name I couldn't find anywhere, on letterhead with a logo I didn't recognize. There were notices from different decades. I could tell from the fonts and the phone number formats and the little tells like a flyer that mentioned a fax number, or a price for a vending soda that was a quarter. Old and new, layered, like the board had been collecting paper for 50 years in a room that was 6 years too young to exist on a slab that was older than all of it. And the lunches in the fridge. The names stayed mostly the same. Denise, R, Pettigrew, Marcus, Tommy. A few others rotated. The food never rotted. That was the thing that broke my draft and smell theory for good. There was food in that fridge in soft brown bags and open Tupperware. And it never spoiled, never smelled. The bananas in one bag stayed exactly half spotted for 3 weeks. A sandwich stayed a sandwich. The fridge wasn't even that cold. It was a fridge that had decided food in it would simply stay the way it was indefinitely, waiting for someone to come back and eat it. The chairs moved between visits. I started taking a photo of the exact chair arrangement every time I left and comparing it to the first photo the next time I came. They moved. Not a lot. A chair pulled out here. A chair turned there. The rolling one drifting closer to the middle of the room over a series of visits, like something was slowly bringing it out to face the door. I never saw one move. They were always still when I was in there. But the room used the time when I wasn't watching. Now I want to tell you about the time clock, because the time clock is when I stopped being able to think of this as a strange but harmless puzzle. In the corner, past the second vending machine, there was a time clock. One of the old mechanical ones. The kind bolted to the wall where you slide a card in and it stamps the time with a hard ka-chunk. Below it was a rack of punch cards in little slots, the way every old workplace had by the door so you could grab your card on the way in. I hadn't looked at it closely the first few visits because it was tucked in the corner and half hidden by the vending machine. But one night, I went over and went through the cards. There were dozens of them. Each one had a name printed at the top and columns of stamped times down the body of the card, in and out, day after day. Most of the names I didn't know. R. Pettigrew's card had punches going back decades, the ink fading the further back you read, and the older stamps used a date format that put the year in 2 digits, starting with an 8. 1980s punches on a card in a room on a slab from 2004. There was a card for Denise with recent punches, this year's dates, clocking in and clocking out like a normal employee, except Denise wasn't anyone I could find in our directory. And there was a card with my name on it. It had punches, recent ones. Each visit I'd made, there was a stamped time, in and out, matching the days I'd gone down there. I had never touched that time clock. I had never put a card in it. But the room had been clocking me in and out every time, keeping my hours, building me a record of time served in a place that didn't exist. I stood there holding my own punch card, and I did the math on the times, and they didn't match my watch. The room's clock ran slow against the world. Every visit, I lost time. The card was the receipt for it. 40 minutes here, an hour there. I added it up and over. Those weeks, I'd lost the better part of a full workday inside that room, without ever feeling like I'd been in there more than a few minutes at a stretch. I put the card back. I don't know why I put it back instead of taking it. I think some part of me already understood that you don't take your own card out of a time clock you're still punching into. You don't quit a job by stealing your own card. You quit by not coming back. But I came back. I need to explain why, because this is the part people won't understand unless I'm honest about where I was in my life. I was exhausted. I'd been exhausted for a long time. I'd been at that building 6 years, doing the work of what should have been 2 or 3 people. Because every time someone left, they didn't get replaced. The budget got tighter. The work orders piled up, and I just absorbed it because that's what you do. I worked nights and weekends. I missed things at home. My back hurt all the time. I'd stopped sleeping right years ago. I was the guy who kept the building alive, and the building's owners did not know my name and would not have noticed if I dropped dead in a panel room. Except that the AC would eventually stop working in that break room. The first few times, it felt good in there. I didn't tell you that part yet because I was embarrassed by it. But it did. It was warm. It was quiet except for the hum. It smelled like coffee. The chairs, even the beat-up ones, were comfortable in a way that office chairs never are. The few times I let myself sit down for a minute, I felt this enormous fatigue I'd been carrying just kind of set itself down next to me. The light stopped feeling harsh. My back stopped hurting. I'd think, I'll just sit for 5 minutes. And then I'd look up, and the wall clock would still say 4:10, and my watch would say I'd lost an hour, and I'd feel rested in a way I hadn't felt in years. That's the trap. I understand it now. The room is kind to exactly the people who have nowhere else to rest. It found me because I was the most tired man in the building, the one most likely to walk to the farthest, quietest dead end and want more than anything to just sit down for a minute where nobody needed anything from me. The room offered me the one thing my job had taken away. Rest. A break. And it kept my hours while it did it. The way the company never bothered to, I started to understand what the names were. The lunches that never spoiled, the punch cards going back decades, the schedule with strangers on it. These were workers. People who'd worked at this place or at the buildings that came before it on this ground, going back further than any of our records. People who got overworked and forgotten and erased from the schedule. People who, somewhere along the line, sat down in the warmest, quietest room at the end of the hall to take 5 minutes. And the room kept their hours from then on. Their lunches still in the fridge. Their cards still in the rack, still clocked in. Never clocked out. I went looking carefully in the daytime, in the public records and the old company history for some of the names. I won't drag you through all of it, but I'll tell you about our Pettigrew because I found him. Robert Pettigrew. He'd worked at the original plant that stood on this ground in the 80s, a maintenance man like me. There was an old newspaper item, just a few lines, about how the plant had run a brutal stretch of forced overtime one winter and a long-term employee, Robert Pettigrew, had simply not shown up one day and never came back. The item framed it as a man who burned out and walked off the job without notice. Quit. Disappeared. The company moved on. Buildings got built over the old plant. And Robert Pettigrew's punch card was in a time clock in a room that shouldn't exist, with punches that, when I looked the last time, had a stamp from that very week. He never walked off the job. He took a break. I think about Denise, whose card had this year's dates. Denise clocked in and out every day. A model employee in a room nobody could find. I never found a Denise in our company. I think Denise is more recent. I think Denise sat down sometime in the last few years, and the company put transferred or no call, no show in a file somewhere, and Denise is still down there taking the break that never ends. This is the thing I can't shake. The company forgot all of them. The company couldn't tell you Robert Pettigrew ever existed. But the building remembered. The building kept their lunches and their punch cards and their chairs. The building remembered the workers better than the people who paid them ever did. And maybe that's the whole point of the room. Maybe it's the only thing left that does remember. The room started acknowledging me directly toward the end. I told you about the schedule with my name. After that, it got more personal. One visit, the coffee pot was full as always, and next to it on the counter was a mug. Not a generic mug. A mug with my name written on the side in marker on a piece of masking tape. The way you label your own mug so coworkers don't use it. It was full. It was warm. Steam was coming off it. Something had made me a cup of coffee and labeled it with my name and set it out where I'd see it. The way a coworker does when they make a pot and pour you one because they know you've had a long night. I didn't drink it. I want that on the record. I've never eaten or drunk anything that came out of that room except the chips I dropped in the sink later in a panic. I didn't drink the coffee. But I stood there and I looked at that mug with my name on it and the steam coming off it, and I felt this pull that I can only describe as homesickness for a place I'd never lived. Like the room was saying, we made you a cup, sit down, you've earned it, you've been working so hard, just 5 minutes. That's when I knew I had to stop going. But I had a problem. And the problem is the reason I'm telling you all this, instead of just walking away and forgetting it. The problem has a name, and the name is Tommy. There's a kid at the warehouse end. Tommy, real name doesn't matter. Early 20s, works shipping, pulls doubles constantly because he's trying to get out of debt. Good kid, tired kid. The kind of tired I recognized because it used to be my kind of tired. And one day, a few weeks after the coffee mug, Tommy stopped me in the loading dock and asked me something that put ice in my stomach. He asked me where the old break room was. The good one. He said somebody told him there was a better break room than the crappy one. By the warehouse, an old one, down in the office wing. Real quiet, nice chairs. Good coffee. He said he was so tired and he just wanted to find some place to take his break, where nobody would bug him. He asked it casual, the way you ask anybody who knows the building. And I remembered the fridge. Tommy, do not touch. There'd been a lunch in that fridge with Tommy's name on it for weeks, before Tommy had ever heard of the room. The room was already expecting him. It had his lunch ready. It was just waiting for him to get tired enough to come looking, the same way it had waited for me, so now I had the choice. The real one. The one the whole thing had been building toward. I could tell Tommy the truth, and watch him decide I was insane, and probably make him more curious, because you tell a tired kid there's a forbidden magic break room and that's an invitation. I could try to seal the door, except I'd watched myself walk through a solid wall on camera and Dale couldn't see the door, and I had no idea how you seal something that isn't there. I could report the whole thing finally and get help and probably get committed. And meanwhile, the room would still be there, waiting, with Tommy's lunch in the fridge. Or I could do the thing I think the room wanted me to do, which was nothing, which was let it happen, let Tommy find his rest. Because God knows the kid deserved a break, and the company was never going to give him one. I lied to him. I told him there was no old break room, that he was thinking of the one by the elevators, and that the office wing end was just storage. I told him the chairs down there were garbage and the coffee was worse. I tried to make it sound boring. I tried to do for Tommy what Dale's forgetting had failed to do for me, which is make the room sound like nothing, so he'd never go looking. I don't know if it worked. That's the truth. I don't know if Tommy's still pulling doubles or if one night he wandered down to the far dead end because he was so tired and the rest of the building was so loud, and found a warm room with good coffee and his name already on a mug. I changed shifts after that. I requested days. I stopped working nights after 11 years of nights because I couldn't be alone in that building in the dark anymore, knowing the door was down there, knowing it had my name in it, knowing it had made me a cup of coffee. I haven't been down that hallway in months. I do my job. I avoid that end of the wing. I let another tech handle anything down there, and I don't ask him what he sees. I think if I don't go, I don't punch in. And if I don't punch in long enough, maybe the room eventually files me under transferred like all the rest and forgets me the way the company forgot Pettigrew. Maybe you can quit. Maybe not coming back is how you clock out. But here's the thing that tells me it's not done with me, and then I'll stop because there's no clean ending to this, and I'm not going to pretend there is. A few weeks ago, I was up on the second floor, far end in the corporate office section, the newer part, nowhere near the office wing dead end. I was working on a thermostat in an empty conference room, broad daylight, building full of people. And through the wall, muffled but clear, I heard a microwave beep. The specific 3 beeps of a microwave finishing a cycle. There is no break room on that side of the second floor. There is no microwave behind that wall. Behind that wall is a chase, and then the exterior, and then the parking lot. I put my hand on the wall and it was warm. Warmer than it should have been? And I swear to you, I smelled coffee. The room isn't in one place. I had it wrong the whole time. It's not a room somebody built and forgot. It's something the building grows wherever there's a tired worker alone at the end of a long shift who needs, more than anything, to just sit down for 5 minutes. It was in the office wing because that's where I was tired. Now it knows where I am. I think about Pettigrew clocking in this week, decades after he quit. I think about the mug with my name on it, the steam still coming off it, sitting on a counter in a room I'm trying to never enter again. I think about how the company would write voluntary resignation on me without blinking, and how the only thing in the whole world that's keeping a record of my hours, that remembers my name, that made me a cup of coffee because it knew I was tired, is the thing that's trying to keep me. And I think about the fact that I never clocked out. My card is still in the rack. My hours are still running. Somewhere in that building, on a wall that's supposed to be solid concrete, there's a door with a frosted glass window and a crooked paper sign. And behind it, the coffee is warm, and the wall clock says 10 after 4. And there's a chair pulled out and turned to face the door, waiting for me to come back and take my break. I just have to stay tired enough to remember why I shouldn't.